Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm going to be looking at how you use the liberal key thinkers in one of the 24 mark essays on the Edexcel A-level politics paper. So I'm going to explore the ideas of Locke and Wollstonecraft and Mill and Rawls and Frieden. I'm going to look at kind of a brief overview of some of their key ideas as picked out by the A-level politics specification, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to produce a series of kind of exemplar paragraphs in which I'm going to show how you would integrate the ideas of the key thinkers to try and illustrate your point and pick up those marks. Now, the 24 mark political ideas essays are found on both component 1 and component 2. So the liberalism is one of the core ideologies and therefore is on component 1. The key to high marks in 24 mark political ideas essays is strong knowledge of AO1, comparison of AO2, and judgments about AO3 of the key thinkers. In every essay you must use at least 3, and questions can focus on human nature, society, economy or state, so it might pick one of those, or it might be a broader comparison between classical and modern liberals. So again, and one of the things to remember on this is that slightly oddly, in terms of the forms of liberalism, it is classical and modern liberalism that are covered under liberalism, whilst neoliberalism, for the reason I'm still not 100% certain on for why, is largely found in the conservatism bit. Go figure. I've already produced a video on exactly how to do the 24 mark political ideas essays in more detail, and you can see an image of it above me, and if you're logged in then there should be a little eye and you can click on that and you can go and find that video. It's on my political ideas playlist. It's also on my A-level politics playlist. So that's a bit of basics about the question types. In terms of our different thinkers, then this is quite literally just as the spec tells us. It picks out a couple of key ideas on each one. I'm just going to talk about those very briefly before going in and looking at these example paragraphs. So in the classical liberal group, we've got Locke. Locke put forward social contract theory, and this is the idea that state, society and government are based on a theoretical voluntary agreement. And therefore there is a key idea of consent between those who are ruling and those who are ruled, and if that consent breaks, then essentially we move into this idea of liberalism as a revolutionary idea, and where governments can be overthrown. Locke also wrote about limited government, that government should be limited and based on consent, and what he means by limited is that it can't be monarchical, can't be tyrannical. There is a constitution or mechanism which sets out what government can and cannot do, and also that behind this there should be a set of rights that are enshrined and protected for the people. And he talks about this idea of consent. Now, consent is slightly different. Classical liberalism is not necessarily promoting full-blown democracy, but it talks about that people should agree to the rules that they're being governed by. Mary Wollstonecraft is a remarkable early liberal writer, and came up with some really kind of key concepts. She talked about reason. Now, reason or rationality is a really important idea across liberalism, and when Wollstonecraft was talking about reason, in particular, some of her writing focused on the fact that women are rational and independent beings capable of reason, and she talks about equality, and this feeds into another idea of formal equality. In order to be free, women should enjoy full civil liberties and be allowed to have a career if they so choose. So rationality and equality, two really important classical liberal ideas that we see coming out in the writing of Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, John Stuart Mill would also largely fit in the classical group. He's often referred to, I think not just by me, as the bridge. He's a kind of the connecting point that connects the classical to the modern, but essentially he's a classical liberal. His most important idea, I think, is the idea of the harm principle. The individual should be free to do anything accept something that harms other individuals, and therefore really only when the only point where the state should really intervene is if people are doing something that harms others. And he talks about tolerance, and this is the belief that popularity of a view does not necessarily make it correct. And he talked about the tyranny of the majority and the potential threat of full-blown democracy, and that the ideas or the rights of the minority or minority groups within society could be oppressed by the view of the majority who don't share the same concerns, and might and therefore through the ballot box could crush the rights of others. So tolerance is again a really important liberal principle, and harm theory is something again I think you find a lot of agreement with across the different branches of liberalism. Moving on to the modern liberals, and we've got two key writers here, John Rawls and Betty Friedan. Now, John Rawls is arguably the most controversial of the modern liberals in terms of there are arguments about whether he's liberal or whether he's socialist. And there are some elements that he defends it very strongly, but there are some elements which you look at and kind of go, that looks a bit like the centre left rather than necessarily liberalism. And one of his key ideas is the theory of justice, and this is the opinion that society must be just and guarantee each citizen a life worth living. So we're talking here about a decent standard of living for everybody, and therefore we can start to see the connections that some people might start connecting to socialism. A really interesting idea of John Rawls is this idea of the veil of ignorance, and this is a hypothetical scenario where essentially you get people to agree on the type of society they would like, whilst removing any knowledge they have about what that position would be in that society. So you don't know colour, you don't know gender, you don't know whether you're going to be rich or poor, any of that. You don't know what position your position is going to be in society. And he says that rationally, and rational is the key bit in this, which links it with other bits of liberalism. He says rationally, when you ask people to carry out this thought experiment that he created, that they would create a far more equal society than the one that we've got, or what we had at the time of his writing. And so he says, well, this shows is that it kind of is fitting with human ideas of rationality of human nature, that it is important that there are adjustments made by states and society to ensure a greater degree of equality, and really pushing the idea of equality of opportunity. Now, Betty Friedan, again, a key modern liberal writer, and she wrote about legal equality, stating that women are as capable as men, but there are kind of oppressive laws and oppressive social views that get in the way, and these need to be overturned. And as well as a theorist, as a lady of action, and she was part of the campaign for the Equal Rights Amendment in America to try and overturn some of these oppressive laws. And she argued very much that the legal route was the route that the feminist movement should take. And she wrote about equality of opportunity, again a key modern liberal idea, and she talked about how women were being held back from their potential because of the limited number of jobs and roles in the economy and society that were seen as being, in inverted commas, acceptable for women. So equality of opportunity is a really, really important modern liberal idea, and again, that's one that Rawls and Friedan would both buy into. And equality of opportunity is liberal, which is different to equality of outcome, which is more socialist. John Rawls does talk about things such as some redistribution of wealth, which again seems to start making some of the bits blurred. Right, so in the next bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to looking at a series of paragraphs that I've written. Just a kind of a warning. Essentially, I'm limited by space. So these are not quite as long or developed as would be absolutely ideal, but I do hope that they put across quite effectively the kind of things that you should be doing in these paragraphs to try and pick up the marks for using the key theorists. So this one, we're looking at a question, to what extent do liberals differ regarding their views on human nature? And I'm going to do a human nature one and society and economy and a state one, just to kind of show the range of the different areas in which you can use it. So on this one, this is about human nature, and this is arguing that they differ. So the views of modern liberals can be seen to be less positive about human nature than the views of classical liberals. Whilst the classical liberals Locke and Wollstonecraft suggest that people are naturally rational and equal, modern liberals see humanity as having potential but on a journey of progress. Whilst Wollstonecraft states that rationalism shows men and women are equal, Frieden argues that human nature up until now has discouraged self-advancement of women. Whilst Locke believes humans are mindful of others, Rawls sees humans as empathetic but needing intervention to turn this into action. These examples highlight the gap between classical rationality and modern potential of human nature. So it's building this argument about that there is a difference, there'll be a fairly subtle one, but there is a difference between the human nature as seen by classical and modern liberals, and in it I've got I've used a range of different theorists. So I've used Locke and Wollstonecraft, and then I've also brought in Frieden and Rawls. So actually I've managed to get 4 key theorists in here. I mean, you could, if you were building on it more, you could maybe concentrate on just 2 of those and expand more on their ideas. But again, I've shown that they differ. I've built it on the ideas. I've got examples, and one of the key bits with this, in terms of writing a really good paragraph for these types of questions, is this is comparative all the way through. So you are always looking at areas of disagreement, agreement, difference, and things like that. So this is a potential paragraph that could be on the other side. So this is showing agreement. So Locke presented a positive view of human nature in that he saw people as rational and believed that even in the state of nature, so a world before there was any kind of formal state, people would respect others and have a good life. And again, this is very different if you've looked at conservatism and the Hobbesian view about human nature. They would pursue their self-interest but be mindful of others and their natural rights. So they wouldn't go stepping on the rights of others. So John Stuart Mill agreed with this and built on the ideas of Locke. Mill also saw human nature as rational, and Mill was also positive in his view on human nature, as it believed that people's human nature was not fixed but had the potential to perpetually progress. The idea of Mill here seems to strongly agree with and build on those of Locke. There is, however, some slight difference on individuality, as Locke sees everyone as being nationally rational and capable, whilst Mill focuses on the individual's journeys towards this. And again, there are other bits you could go into more detail. So, for example, I talked earlier about Mill's harm theory. And so you could connect Mill's harm theory with the idea of being mindful of others and their natural rights presented by Locke. And again, that would show a positive view on human nature, where people are individuals and bent on self-interest, but are concerned about their impact on others. As you can see on here, the judgment is not absolute. I'm not going to say they absolutely agree. I've pointed to a degree of difference, and in a way, in an essay, you could have this maybe this paragraph first, and it following the one that we did previously, following on from it, or vice versa. Again, it's having that reinforced judgment running through, where I kind of returned to the idea in that previous paragraph. The next 2 examples I'm going to look at are to do with society. So in the first one, again, I'm looking at areas where there's agreement between the key thinkers. So Wollstonecraft and Frieden agree that society has had a negative impact on the position of women. Wollstonecraft wrote about how society infantilized women, so treated them as children, leading them to act in a more childlike way. This treatment by society suppressed the rational individualism of women. Frieden, writing 200 years later, agreed that society was suppressing female individualism by denying them equal opportunity. Frieden was involved in the campaign for the Equal Rights Amendment in the USA in an attempt to right this wrong. Whilst closely aligned, the views of these two thinkers are not identical, as whilst Wollstonecraft blamed the lack of education for any apparent differences between men and women, Frieden argued that women were actually complicit in their own repression. So again, what we've got here is we've got knowledge of the ideas of Wollstonecraft and Frieden, which would hit all the stuff at AO1. It is comparative and talking about the areas on which they agree. But then in the AO3 bit, what I've tried to do at the end, or try to demonstrate at the end of this paragraph, is this idea of judgment coming in, where you're not saying, well, it's not just complete agreement. So they say that, and then just leaving it. It's trying to then take that further step, and this is kind of your AO3 bit, where it looks at the degree of agreement, and on here it's not absolute, which is likely to be the case, actually, isn't it? Whenever you're comparing key thinkers, they are likely to agree to an extent, but they're not to absolute levels. There's likely to be some kind of nuance in there, and the more understanding of nuance you can display, the better. Now, so this is the other side, so looking, saying that they disagree on the nature of society. So John Rawls' theory of the veil of ignorance is markedly different to classical liberals' ideas on society. The veil of ignorance is a theory in which individuals agree on the type of society they want when they don't know whether they would be rich or poor, etc. And you might go into a bit more detail on that. The society which Rawls envisaged would require extensive state intervention to ensure, through his theory of justice, a society that would guarantee each citizen a life worth living. Again, if I had a bit more space, I would expand and explain that in a little bit more detail. Classical liberals such as Locke concentrate much more on a society made of autonomous individuals who would make decisions based on their own self-interest. So again, so far in what I've done is I've demonstrated a difference, but then again, this is a bit where I'm trying to get that bit of nuance in and that bit more a depth of evaluation. Rawls would deny there was a strong difference, seeing his ideas being like Locke's based on the concept of rationalism and empathy for others. The societies their theories would lead to, however, would be fundamentally different. And again, if I had a bit more space, I might expand on that a bit. So I've brought in the idea of Rawls defending himself against his accusation that he's kind of stepping outside traditional liberal thought. And Rawls does defend himself in his writing quite strongly on those kinds of accusations. So again, we've got comparison, we've got knowledge of of two different theorists, and we're trying to show in our AO3 be that a degree of nuance in terms of the judgment. The next one is one that is often debated within liberalism, which is to do with capitalism, and so this would fit with a kind of an economy, the economy theme. So classical liberalism is the ideology of the free market, based on the ideas of Adam Smith that thinkers such as Locke support. Modern liberalism, by contrast, is opposed to unrestrained capitalism and supports the ideas of John Maynard Keynes. The changing attitude towards economics amongst liberals can be shown through the ideas of Locke, Mill and Rawls. Now, one of the important bits on here, you can talk about other theorists. So I've brought in Keynes and Smith. They are probably the two most important economic theorists in classical modern liberalism, but they aren't amongst our 5 key thinkers. So we still need to try and get across an entire essay, not necessarily within one paragraph. I tried to do it in one paragraph here. You need to get across the ideas of at least 3 of the key thinkers who are on the list of key thinkers. So what I've done is I've decided to bring in Locke, Mill and Rawls. What I'm going to do on this one, rather than just directly comparing 2, I'm showing progression through the 3. So Locke saw private property and wealth as a natural right. Mill, who supported free market economics, but supported measures such as inheritance tax. Inheritance was not earned and inhibits individual initiative. So again, even more space, you can go on and explain. So Mill, and all classical liberals aren't keen, for example, very much on taxing things like income, which because someone through their own initiative has earned that, and people using their initiative is to be encouraged. But Mill talks about inheritance as in a similar way that, for example, you might hear a neoliberal in the modern world talking about welfare, kind of going, it acts as it inhibits individual initiative, because if you just are wealthy and you don't have to do anything to get it, then that stops you thriving and progressing. And ideas of progress again start with Mill, then run through modern liberalism. Rawls goes much further than either of the earlier liberals in terms of attacking free markets, in arguing for state intervention to help with the poorest, including some redistribution of wealth. This demonstrates that liberalism fundamentally shifts from full support of free market capitalism to attacking its excesses and failings. And again, a bit more, if I had a bit more room, I'd go into some of the stuff that Rawls says about state intervention and the need for redistribution of wealth and the ideas of equality of opportunity within the economy, and how free markets don't actually allow that, and the redistribution of wealth suggests that actually there is a degree in which you can be too rich, according to Rawls, which is not something which really fits the earlier stages of liberalism. So in all of this, we've got a whole kind of range of ideas, and we can show changes over time, so a degree of disagreement. Now, on the other side, there is a counter-argument. So you can have liberalism is the ideology that aligns with free market capitalism. Wollstonecraft, a classical liberal, argued that the free market could play a key role in liberating women. Friedan, a modern liberal, agreed that free market capitalism could help female emancipation. Both writers connect the ideas of economic and personal freedom. The idea is also ascribed to by Mill, as he believed that individual enterprise was the key to people's progress. These ideas demonstrate that liberals across the spectrum agree on the positive potential of free markets. That is not to say that they disapprove of any state intervention. Locke argues the state should act as an arbitrator, and modern liberals also argue for the state intervention to regulate the economy. So in this, we got again the other side of the argument, and we've largely focused on this on Wollstonecraft and Friedan, and again with more space, you could probably go into definitely go into their ideas in a bit more detail. But to reinforce it, I then connected it to both Mill and Locke. So we've got a whole range of thinkers. We've got comparison, we've got detail, and again we've got that nuance in terms of what they're saying. So again, sometimes you see the error in this, decided that the classical liberals prescribe to a completely free market, but there's always a degree of arbitration in there. So it's just to try and build that, and that therefore you can get a bit more of a connection with the modern liberalism, though obviously modern liberals go a lot more further in terms of their ideas of state intervention in the economy. So the next, the next couple of examples I'm going to look at in terms of paragraphs are about the state. So this is addressing this question at the top. To what extent do liberals agree on the functions of the state? So liberals agree on the state playing a key role in protecting the rights of individuals. So Locke is a key thinker for liberalism and the role of the state. Locke argued for a limited government. This meant that it would not have the power to impinge on the rights of individuals. As the power of the state was to be based on consent from below, if the state overstepped its powers, according to Locke, it should be removed. Wollstonecraft supported these ideas with her theory of formal equality, ensuring that men and women enjoy full civil liberties. The modern liberal Betty Friedan's idea of legal equality, including that oppressive laws should be overturned, further shows agreement with Locke. And again, with the Wollstonecraft and the Friedan bit, with a bit more room, you'd want to go on and explain these ideas in a bit more detail. Liberals across the spectrum from classical to liberal would fundamentally agree with the idea that the state should hold up individual rights and oppose states and systems that don't. So on this, again, in some of the others, I've really gone for kind of more of a nuanced judgment where I've kind of balanced it a bit. But on this one, I think this is a really strong point. So if you think it is a really strong point and there isn't kind of a bit of a oh yeah, but not quite that, then you can go and you can really push it and say, no, this is the case. Liberals absolutely agree on this idea. And I think that one works quite nicely. Again, in an ideal world, if you're writing this in a homework or in an exam, you'd want to expand on those views a little bit further. So a point on the counter side to this, again on liberals and the state. Modern liberals argue for much greater government intervention in a range of issues compared with early classical liberals. Rawls argues for the state to intervene to ensure a life worth living for all, ensuring a minimum standard of living and equality of opportunity. These ideas are seen in practice in modern liberalism, with Keynesian economics striving for full employment and the Beveridge Report of 1942, which led to the creation of the welfare state and the NHS in the UK. This is very different to the role that Locke envisaged for the state as simply an arbiter between individuals. This difference stems from the classical liberal focus on negative liberty, whilst modern liberals want the state to strive for positive liberty. A modern liberal will strive to unleash people's potential, whilst a classical liberal state would focus on leaving individuals alone and promoting self-help and advancement. And again, there's room in there, not for me, but in a fully written bit where you can go into detail about what negative and positive liberty are. There's definitely room towards the bottom of that to get John Stuart Mill in and harm theory. And so we've picked up on a degree of difference, which is about intervention. So I'm hoping what this has done is it's given you a range of different paragraphs, picking up different arguments, using different elements of the key thinkers' views, and showing how these answers should be comparative. There should always be comparison in every single paragraph. Now, the ones that I've looked at have picked out one of the four key themes: human nature, society, economics, and state. If you've got a question like the one that's on the top of the screen now, to what extent have modern liberals abandoned the ideas of classical liberals, then essentially you could use a mixture, or all of, the paragraphs that I've just gone through. They could be the bits that you pick out and go, well, they agree on this, but they disagree on that. And you could build it in that way. I actually think questions like the one above are actually slightly nicer. They give you a bigger range of things to talk about. Students will sometimes struggle if you're doing a comparison on the economy to get three very distinct points, and same on society or human nature and things like that. Whilst on this one, it's going to be, you actually got the opposite problem where your difficulty is going to be selection, because there's so many different things that you could do. And it's only 24 marks, so you've not got an inordinate length of time. So you've got, I don't know, about 32 minutes to do this in full-blown exam conditions. Again, so if you were doing a question like that, then you could pick and mix a selection of those paragraphs that I've done earlier, or you could build an essay around those 8 paragraphs that I've looked at. I hope this has been useful for you and given you an idea in terms of writing style in these, if not, and some ideas of deeper understanding of the comparative views of these different key thinkers. I do absolutely believe this. The kind of the political ideas is the most interesting and kind of thought-provoking part of the A-level politics specification, and something that a lot of students can really get their teeth into. As I say, these paragraphs are not the absolute finished articles. I would expect in a homework essay or an exam some of those ideas to be expanded on a little bit further, but I'm a bit limited in terms of both time and space in terms of making these videos. If it has been helpful for you, then please hit like. If you have any comments or questions, then please leave those below. If you haven't done so already, then please do subscribe. There are over 150 videos in my A-level politics playlist which go through all the content that I teach. So I teach all of component 1. I teach component 2. The non-core ideology I do is nationalism, but there's all the rest of component 2, and then there's nationalism as well. And then for component 3, I teach the American unit, and I've got all the content of all that stuff covered. And then there is a whole series of different kind of practical videos going through how you do the different question types and stuff like this, about constructing different paragraphs and things like that, and the videos on different assessment objectives. So hopefully all you could possibly need to be successful in A-level politics. Also, as suggested by the name of the channel, there's also a whole load of history stuff as well. So if you're doing A-level history as well, then have a look at the different playlists I've got for the different units and components that I teach. Thank you very much for watching.